No? Okay, good. So I spend a lot of time on Twitter. If you want to hang out, that's where to go hang out and find me if you want to talk games or computer security or software or beer. My roles in this world. I'm a husband. My wife Gabrielle is in the back probably feeding our daughter, which leads to the whole father thing. Fatherhood plays a big role in this talk, so we'll talk more about that later. Actually, professionally, I am an author. I've written around 16 technical books, or written on 16 technical books, mostly about Microsoft .NET technologies. I am a software composer. That term comes from a book called Lorem Ipsum, a children's book about computer science. I strongly recommend everybody read. It, in 138 pages, taught me more about computer science than a bachelor's degree in 20 years in the industry did. And one of the things that they taught was that solving problems is a lot like composing music. And it really is. Having done both professionally, I can say that there's a tremendous mesh. And now whenever I put software composer on my resume just to screw up the resume mills and stuff, it's a lot of fun. I am a home brewer. I did not bring any beer to this con. I probably should have. I am also a lockpicker. You'll probably find me sitting in the Lockpick Village opening things. I am the administrative director of Locksport International. I'll be giving a talk about what Locksport has taught me about security tomorrow at 5 also. I am actually a ninja. I'm 5th Q. I mean, like really a ninja. Like I have a belt, ninja. And I'm also something of an insurrectionist. I have a really bad habit of saying the wrong thing at the wrong time and getting in trouble for it. So, but none of that matters, actually, because what we're talking about today is totally unlike anything else that I normally talk about. What we're talking about is the story of how I wrote a miniatures game from scratch so that my son could play miniatures games with me. And that's what we're here to talk about today. So if you thought we were talking about computer security or lockpicking, that would be a different con, for me anyway. So, my credentials. You mostly know my credentials in security and lockpicking, but how about gaming? Well, this was my gaming posse in 1985. I'm the one with the glasses in the front, sitting cross-legged. I can no longer sit cross-legged, by the way, so that's where that's worth. I have been gaming for a very long time. In fact, here is where I started. I was very upset when the second edition came out. I'm actually still a little bitter. I remember when people went to this, and I was not interested. In fact, I dissed it totally. It's just totally, it's too mainstream. Not for me. I'm going to play the real games. Yeah, anyway. And then, of course, all my friends who played, they all have Alpha Decks now, and they're selling their Black Lotuses for $1,000 at Origin. So who's laughing now? Got to stop hitting this thing. I'm going to break it. So I talked about fatherhood. Kaylin's in the back of the room. This is her. She's a little too young to be gaming. She mostly eats Legos. This one, however, is already quite a gamer. And he's up there setting up our gaming board now and doing an excellent job of it, by the way, Adam. And he really enjoys gaming. And part of the reason Gabrielle and I are big gamers. And so we would go to conferences and do things, and he would really want to participate. And we learned that the games and children mix much better than even like contemporary education and social theory would have you believe. The kids learn to take turns in games. And even if you're just playing Candyland with a 3-year-old, the concept of it's my turn now, it's your turn next, that has to be taught. That's not natural. What's natural is me. But teaching, that's an important lesson to be learned. You also learn to make decisions in gaming, which is something else that isn't natural. Children are kind of brought up, especially in the United States, to do what they're told, not to look at a scenario and go, what would be best here? And what they do what games do is put them in a position where they have to, without any help, look at a situation and go, what's the best thing to do? Not the right thing. The best thing. Very different, extremely hard for somebody under the age of 8 or so. And also, really, and very importantly, especially for this one, we learn to win and lose. Losing is not fun for anybody, but it's part of life, and we have to learn how to deal with it and also how to win gracefully, which sometimes is hard. So those lessons are very good, and things go well together for kids in games until they don't. There are some problems that I've discovered, especially trying to move forward as Adam ages. The first problem is 900-page rulebooks, which are extraordinarily prevalent in the kind of games that I'm most used to. There's, of course, the whole small parts issue where you know, don't play with this if you're under the age of 3, but I think we're largely past that at this stage of the game. The biggest problem is the running with scissors issue. The large amounts of logic is not the kind of thing that your average 6-year-old is going to be able to parse well. They're going to get frustrated very quickly and quit. So if you look at these games, we find out that we have this massive gap between the kinds of games that are appropriate for, say, 4-year-olds and then the kinds of games that are appropriate for 12-year-olds. And I found that gap is remarkably huge. What I decided I wanted to do was write a bridge, some kind of bridge game that I could use, like this has been done in programming languages over and over and over again. People have written these small, intricate but not overly sophisticated languages to teach children programming. I mean, we used Visual Basic, or Basic, not Visual Basic, Basic when I was young, and now there are much better examples going forward. I wanted to do the same thing for games. So what I decided to do was write a simplified version of Warhammer. Now, has anybody here know what Warhammer is? Okay, so I've got a couple people. For the rest of you, let me tell you what Warhammer is. Warhammer is a miniatures game. Okay, it is played on a table with actual miniatures that can be customized, painted, collected, whatever, and then a set army list. And that army list is designated by points. So in order for your character to cast this spell, it's going to cost you 30 points. That spell will cost you 40. And then the two sides, or however many sides there are, agree on how many points their army is going to have at the start of the game. That makes sure that we have a relatively even battle. The only thing that should separate the two is tactics. Of course, that all depends on the game design. If the game is designed right, that works. If the game is designed wrong, it doesn't, which is why many miniatures games have fallen flat. Warhammer was written very well, and it succeeded. The reason it has worked well is because it is impossibly complicated. The rule books are like this big if you stack them together. I can't play it without help, and I'm not kidding. I mean, the two people that I normally play Warhammer with both have an IQ of about 160. They have the rules freaking memorized. And I go, all right, so I want to move my dwarves over there. How do I do that again? And they're like, yeah, you have to sort this, then roll over. Okay, that's fine. Page 97 of the rulebook. Oh, okay, I'll do that. So that's Warhammer. Also, Warhammer has the additional problem, of course, most people love this, problem of being long and ugly. Warhammer takes about 3 hours to play. And it's played in these huge steaming halls with a bunch of middle-aged guys that haven't showered recently for hours and hours on end, and they love it. We go to a gaming conference in Ohio. Well, I am in Ohio. Oh, I've traveled too much recently. We go to a gaming conference in Columbus called Origins. If you have not been there, I strongly recommend you go. It is amazing. 14,000 of your best friends playing everything from vampire LARPs to poker. Seriously, it's astounding. The Columbus Convention Center is completely taken over, and one whole hall is miniatures game. And that's pretty much what it looks like, except bigger. So, how am I doing on time? Oh, I'm doing great. Oh, no, that's not time. Okay, I'm still doing great. So, my strategy. Okay, I thought that the principles of Warhammer, okay, miniatures game played on a tabletop with points, more or less, could be used to produce a totally new game with much less in the way of strategy and much less in the way of tactics that would be achievable for a young child. Hey, Adam, you've been doing stuff for a long time. Okay, is everything all right? Okay. Just want to make sure you're not setting out every miniature we have. So, here was my strategy. My first strategy is I diluted points to dice. So, instead of building a unit of Warhammer miniatures where this power is this many points, this power, so this unit's 392 points and this unit's 286 points, we are going to instead just decide that a unit is a certain number of dice. So at the base level, a unit of 10 archers will be 10 dice. Okay? Up and down. That's what it comes down to. I decided we would have exactly 2 classes of characters. Anybody who's any kind of gamer probably recognizes that term. Are you a spellcaster? Are you a thief? Are you a warrior? Are you what are you? I have 2 classes in this game. I have not told you what the name of the game is yet. I realized that when I went through the slides, I forgot to fix it. We named the game Torna. So if I eventually say Torna, you'll know what it is. That's the name of the game or the working name. So I have two classes. I have shooters and I have melee, and that's it. Okay? It doesn't matter whether you have a missile launcher or a bow and arrow or a sling or a rock you're throwing, you're a shooter. And if you have a sword or your fists or a big club or a jackhammer, you're melee. Doesn't matter. And then movement, I then restricted to mounted and on foot. And that's it. Okay, Adam. Okay, just calm down, take a seat or something. Mounted and on foot. So you can either walk more or less or do whatever you do with normal locomotion, or you can ride something, a horse, a tank, I don't care. There's two categories. So, as it turns out, it all worked pretty well. Strangely enough, it all worked pretty well. Let me tell you a little bit of the details of how it all worked together. So it all came down basically to miniatures, dice, and distance. The miniatures are kind of the draw for a kid because, as you can see, he's been over here futzing with them steadily for 15 minutes since we started. They are fun, interesting, collectible, not exactly cheap, but you can find them with reasonable cost. You can paint them yourselves. You can add things to them. You can use existing stuff. Because Torna is so loose and we have so few character roles, you can use your Legos, you can use your army men, you can use anything you want. Any toy that can be stood and serviceably moved as a unit can be played with as part of a Torna game. As long as you can fit it into one of the classes and you decide ahead of time what it is, you're set to go. Then, the other side of the piece is dice and distance. Dice and distance basically play the core of the game. You use a tape measure to move your units, so you're learning distance and you're learning spatial integrity. And then you use the dice to do things like conduct warfare. So you get to learn mathematics and probability and all of those wonderful things you deal with. So we get the math in and the life skills in, with the draw being the miniatures. I've learned this is kind of an important part of building a toy or any kind of educational system for young people. You got to have the hook, and then you got to have the payoff. And the hook is the miniatures, and the payoff is the mathematics and general life skills that you learn. So set up a game. Well, Adam's been setting up a game for a while here, and you can see that there's really two things. One of which he's doing invisibly, and one of which he's doing obviously. The first thing you need to do is build a playing surface. Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. The nice thing about Torna, or any miniatures game really, but Torna especially, is that it can be played on any flat surface. Any table is fine. This is much narrower table. We usually use our kitchen table, which is monstrous. And he can't even reach across it. This might be a better table for him. Be less crazy, please. Thank you. So you need to set up a playing surface, and then you need to size the army. Just like with Warhammer, where you're going to decide how many points you have on either side, in Torna you decide how many dice you have on either side. Now, Adam, how many dice do we have on either side of that army? Did you count?
7. 5, 6, and 7. 7? Oh, okay.
Okay, don't worry about him.
Sorry.
So we'll play a little bit, and you get to come over here, and I'll count up to make sure everything's right. But he has units set up here. For instance, here is a unit of mounted knights, and there's 6 here. So that could be 6 dice, or if one of them is as a captain, he might be a 2-dice player. Okay, so when he attacks, he gets 2 dice to attack with, and then when he defends, he has 2 dice worth of life to lose. All right, so this unit could be worth 7 points, or it could be worth 6. We have to decide in advance and write it down, or make some kind of notation so that our 2 sides are equal. So that's the other half of the setup that's kind of been happening invisibly here. Now, admittedly, that is not the easiest of concepts, and I will have to go back over this before we play and make sure that it was added up correctly, because it's not easy. But you'll see a little bit later on, when we play at home, we actually write down an army list. And that's another bit of that educational piece that makes things really interesting. So Torna, like Warhammer, is a turn-based game. You go first and manipulate all your units, and then your opponent goes and manipulates all of their units. When one of us has no units left, the other one has won. That is the basic flow of the game. Like I said, there's no game board. You play on a tabletop with whatever things you want. Then movement is all conducted with a tape measure. So you know how far your units can move, and you just point them in the direction they want to go. You get 1 free reconfiguration per turn, and then you move them their set movement for their character class. Archers, well, I'm sorry, shooters in general, get to move 2 inches. They have a shorter move to balance out the fact that they can put damage anywhere on the board. People on foot can move 4 inches, and anything mounted can move 8 inches. Units, like I said, units are allowed 1 free formation per turn, so you can change your line or rotate once per turn for free, and that just fits into the system. But you cannot split, and you cannot split units, but you can merge them. Okay, that's been an interesting little twist to the rules that we've needed to do. Another piece that's interesting, we'll talk about actually in melee, so hang on for a second. So, yes, units can stay together. Units have to stay together. They can merge but not split. I said that already. So that's movement. Let's talk about battle. So there's 2 kinds of battle, I said earlier. There's shooting and there's melee. So, like I said, arrows, missiles, don't care. It's all the same. It's going to work exactly the same way. So more or less, here's the way it works. If you have a melee going on here, what we have in this picture is a set of unpainted knights, for ease of clarity, a set of unpainted knights and a set of painted knights, and they're fighting each other. So when the person whose turn it is to attack, they count up the number of dice in their unit. So if we say, for instance, that this dude here is a captain, and these 2 guys are regular guys, then that's a 4-die unit. So we would pick up 4 dice, 4 6-sided dice, and roll them. Because they're melee, because they're melee units, they get a roll to hit of 3 or more. All right. So if they roll a 3, 4, 5, or 6, they have hit. Then you pick up all the dice that has hit and you roll it again, and that's rolling for damage. Damage is 4 or more for melee units. So 4, 5, or 6 damages. Every damage you do takes a die away from the opposing unit. So this unit has 4 people in it. Okay. All of them are normal, so it's 4 dice. So if I were to roll and do 3 hits and then roll again and do 2 damage, they would take 2 dice worth of damage in that unit. Because of the way that unit is structured, that means 2 of the men are dead. They'd be removed from the table. Does that make sense? So I've taken probably about 90 pages of the Warhammer rulebook and condensed it to that. But it works. Shooting is very similar. Okay? It's the dice of the units are the same. So, I'm sorry. So we have these archers over here, right? So there's 6 archers there. So they have 6 dice worth of archers. The only difference is because shooters can land damage anywhere on the field, they don't have to move to go get it. It's a little harder to hit and a little harder to damage. So when they roll, they hit on a 4 or more and damage on a 5 or more to balance the game. There's also an interesting tidbit that we've, a couple of interesting additional rules we've added on, and we'll talk about adding on rules as we go. In melee, we added on the concept of charge. Normally, you can't move and shoot in the same turn. I think I said that before. Normally, you can't move and shoot in the same turn. But in in the case of melee troops, if they move into the unit, they can attack that turn. So if you're mounted, for instance, and the unit you're attacking is within 8 inches, you can move and hit at the same turn. So that's an added rule that we put in to balance a little bit more towards the melee guys, because honestly, the melee guys were all getting killed by the shooters before they get into the play. Then shooting, what we did is we started to introduce terrain. Okay, we would put stuff, non-player character stuff, on the field of play in order to block shooters. Once again, to try to reduce the power of shooters because they were still massacring everybody. So now you have to have line of sight. So you actually have to get down, and if your unit can't see the unit you're shooting at, even partially obscured, you can't shoot them. Oh, sorry. I'm not used to my new controller, so you're going to have to give me a break here. Then things get fun. Because now that we have a basic rule set, we can pretty much do whatever we want. You want to do some neat machines? No problem. Okay, that's probably a little big, but you get the idea, right? You can put anything on the table and call it a player. At least you're entertaining them. You want to do something with terrain? You want to build your own? You want to use Legos? Do we have the Legos out, Adam? Yeah, okay. Did you make it a tank, or is it actually a building or something? A bridge, okay. So we got a bridge. You want to make a bridge? You could go all out. You could model if you wanted to. You can make a river and do a whole permanent setting to play, which Warhammer players and miniatures players in general do regularly. You can pretty much do whatever you want. Anything you want to set on the board, you can call a character, assign dice to it, and you know exactly what it can do, how far it can move, and how well it can shoot. So the only thing that I'd say is that agree on the rules beforehand. Like in our games, tanks are always 4 dice. If we put something on the thing and say, oh, this is a tank, that's 4 dice in one unit. or one physical, like, move by itself thing. So that's neat because you get to roll 4 dice at once. That's a lot of damage in one shot, but that's a lot of your army tied up in one thing. So there's some balance at play there. So the end game, I mentioned before, the game ends when one player runs out of pieces. When you've killed all of your opponent's units, all the pieces are gone out of every unit, all the players are gone out of every unit, the game is over, and you have won. So Bill, how did it work out? Well, actually, it's worked out awesomely. Would you say it's fun? Do you like to play Torna? Yes, you do. You're kind of wondering why we're not playing right now. I spent more time teaching good gaming habits than I spent teaching the game. That's an honest statement. He picked up the rules of the game a year ago. He's 6 now. I taught him when he was 5. He picked up the rules of the game in about a half hour. I'm still teaching him good gaming habits. He's real good, though. Rolling the dice neatly, the basics of tactics, good sportsmanship, are the kinds of things that actually become more of a lesson than the rules themselves. You need to be a stickler for the rules. For instance, point of view, for cover, it's not like you're actually out there with a paintball gun, and if they can't see you, they can't shoot you because you're behind something. There's argument. Well, I can sort of see that character. No, Adam, if you can't see, if it's blocked in any way, you can't shoot them. That's it. But it's subjective, so you get that kind of conversation. So that's good. And then the biggest deal is enforcing not changing the rules midstream. Because it's, well, actually, he gets to put the train down, and he goes, well, actually, I wanted these trees over there. Adam, we're 3 turns into the game. The trees didn't just get up and move. Well, but I really want them over there. I know, but we don't change the rules in the middle of the game. Another good one is actually, he's a captain now. They promoted him. So he's 2 dice. Okay, we can't do that in the middle of the game. You don't do that. No, I do that. So what was the aftermath? Basically, as far as the game is concerned, after a long game, losing kind of stinks. So he wants to play bigger and bigger games with more and more miniatures and goes against Legos and Army Men and all this different stuff out. We end up with like a 90-point game, and it runs for an hour. And then he loses. And after you've played something for an hour, you've put that much of your time into, losing is not the best thing ever. And for the record, I do not always win. He regularly wins the game. There is enough just blind luck in the game that even if I actually try to do some tactical things, he will still beat me occasionally. Actually, about half the time. So what you do is you keep it moving. I take distractions. We actually clear the table before we start to play, things like that. Those kinds of things make a big difference when you're playing a game with a young person. You also need to clean up the game board as you go. So when characters in the game die or whatever, make sure you take them off the board. Less things to fiddle with while you're doing your turn. Makes life a lot easier. So what have I learned out of all of this? I've learned some really pretty interesting things about the psychology of 6-year-olds that I didn't know before, and I wish I probably should sit and buy a psychologist some beer and learn more. The capacity for learning is significantly greater than I thought. We had played 2 games, and he wanted to enhance the rules. We added 2 dice captains in the next game. He had no problems with terrain conceptually. He knew he had to plot his movements around things, that if he had a unit of knights, the knights couldn't spread out through the trees. It doesn't work that way with a horse. All those things he had 0 problems with. I know he's a smart kid, but I was very surprised by that. Reading is often the biggest barrier to game adoption, frankly, and one of the huge benefits of Torna is there's really no reading. As long as the adult knows the rules, the child doesn't have to do anything. In D&D, you have to be able to read. Magic, even, which is a relatively simple game to play, it's constant reading and big words, too, on those cards. The rules are written right on the card if you don't know the game. If you can't read, you can't play. So even simple card-based games, collectible card-based games, can't be played by kids who aren't strong readers. Now, as it turns out, he's a very prolific reader, largely because of his mother. Actually, entirely because of his mother. And he could play a game that involves reading, and regularly does. He plays games on the Xbox that involve a lot of reading and has no problems with it. But the neat thing about building a game like this is it doesn't require any specialized reading skills. Wrong button again. All right. And the other thing that I learned is sufficiently interesting games will involve a young kid for a much longer time than I thought. He could get distracted in 30 seconds. Trust me. I mean, keeping his attention is very difficult. But if it's his miniatures that he painted and he cares about the characters that are represented by those miniatures, he'll play for now. Seriously, play for now. It's pretty neat. So where do I go from here? Well, let me tell you. Basically what this all started out is just something to play with him. And I was just sketching rules in the back of a napkin. Basically, I ended up writing up a huge blog post for it, and there was a lot of comments, a lot of interest that I got feedback from email and blog comments and Twitter. And I thought, I really should write this into a presentation and give it someplace. And where better than NOTACON? I mean, this is the kind of thing. This is hacking a game, right? Let's talk about it. So what I'd like to do is actually build up a rule sheet for it and post it up on my blog so that people can download it and play it and try it. But I want to rev the rules first. I want to add a couple of things that are optional so that you can play it in this simple version that we play here, or you can add a couple of things. I'd like to add some different kinds of units maybe. I don't know exactly what I want. Probably magic users and provide a simple magic system. I'll talk about that in a little bit too, or at least mention it. Something that Adam has been asking for, and actually he asked for without any input from me at all and has been repeating the need for, is loyalty and fleeing. If you've played any miniatures games before, you know that, that especially if you're dealing with more spurious characters like orcs and goblins, for instance, in the Warhammer world, they will run away. If they feel they're being beaten, you have to roll a loyalty check and they will run. Well, Adam wants to run away. And one of the kind of table rules that we have is that once you're engaged in battle, you can't disengage from battle. The battle continues until one side wins, which is, it's not actually part of the rules of the game, but I would strongly recommend it for anybody. But I also want to say that we may either require a loyalty check if you've lost more than half your units, for instance, or half your characters in your unit, or we may allow you to roll for retreat if you so choose, and then reform. Because there is some tactical benefit to that. If your unit has lost half its characters and this unit's lost half its characters, and you would like them to fall back and reform into a larger unit, then there's some tactical benefit to that. So that's something I was considering doing, but I'm not sure how to do easily. So if anybody has any comments, let me know afterwards. Something else I'd also like to add, and he's asked for too, is magic and technology. It would be really good to be able to put a character, like we have magic user characters in the miniatures, but they don't actually do any magic. We just call them shooters and pretend like they shoot fireballs or whatever, and that's their shooting. But it would be interesting to be able to have some kind of magic that is enforceable in the dice-based system. And I don't know how we're going to do that yet. So one of the interesting things, Adam is homeschooled, and we have a really good time with that. We don't homeschool for any particular reason aside from the fact that we like to travel and do neat stuff. And it's really tough to do that if you have to stick to a school schedule. And then sometimes he likes to sit on the floor. What do you have in your mouth? Oh, don't do that. Because of that, we're constantly surrounded with educational stuff. There's a site called Brain Pop Junior that's this big educational site with all these flash movies and activities and stuff, and he just sits and watches it for fun. Okay, so it's a constant theme in our house. There's always the curriculum laying around and worksheets to be done. Even on Saturday morning, he'll get up and do a math worksheet or whatever. So the educational pieces are a big part of this, and one of the first educational things that I've gotten out of this is honestly just handling the dice. It sounds ridiculous, but it was amazing watching him pick up 10, because if you have a unit with 10 characters in it, you pick up 10 dice, you roll them all, and it's like, okay, all the dice that are 3, 4, 5, and 6, pick them up and roll them again to see who did damage. And watching him struggle with that initially, and now just go like this, and pick it up, I don't know what synapse connected up here, but something was learned there that is translating into handling small numbers very quickly and efficiently. Like that, those people who can look at numbers and quickly figure out what 15% of it is, do that kind of estimation, that synapse, which didn't connect for me, well, actually it really still hasn't connected for me, but that's neither here nor there. That's already connected for him. He's already making those kind of quick judgments about numbers. Writing the army list is a significant piece of this. He does not like to write. He does like to compose text if he gets to type it, but writing an army list is not his favorite thing in the whole world. And we will write army lists. This is one of your army lists, right, Adam? Yep. Yes, 30 archers. Actually, 35, I think, archers. There's another little 5 down there. But you'll notice he didn't write archer 4 times for the 4 units of archers because that would be a lot of writing. But one of the interesting things is we have a first grader who has absolutely no fear of adding a column of 9 numbers. He does it all the time. And that's, I've learned, is not exactly normal. But I'm really glad to see it, because it's a skill he's picked up from gaming. Not just this, we also play Bakugan, which has a lot of having to add stacks of numbers to add up your power-ups. But between those two games, we have got this. And then, honestly, tactics, which sounds like a ridiculous thing for a kid to a 6-year-old need to learn, but it actually isn't, because it applies to what I mentioned at the very beginning of the talk to kind of come around full circle. Looking at a situation and figuring out the best possible answer is not something that just not something that you are born with. It's something you have to learn how to do. And playing games, especially a tactic-heavy game like this one, makes a lot of that happen. So it has been a really strong educational market for us. So if you'd like, he has set up a game over here, and anyone who's interested can come up and we'll play around after I re-level our characters, and you guys can watch if you wish, or if you've learned what you want to learn and you want to go get a beer, knock yourself out, that's fine too. We'll play a quick round, and then we'll be done. So let's count here, Adam. All right, so I see what you've done here. Okay.
Captains.
Okay.
Captain. That's that.
Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14.